Hello, everybody. Welcome back to E20 Zone TV. To my right is Sloth. You know who he is from Bubbly and Iron's YouTube channel. We're here to talk about West Ham United 2023-24, best and worst moments, David Moyes, and the future under Julian Lopetegui. Sloth, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. Just enjoying this unusual spate of sunshine and warm weather we're having. It's been really nice today.
I know, mate. I think everyone knows that the Premier League's over. Everyone can enjoy the
Yeah.
summer there. Do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Right, let's get into this. Premier League 2023-24. Sloth, take it away, mate.
Well, look, it's been a really interesting season. It started off really well, and as I seem to say every single year with West Ham, it's been a missed opportunity. Really, I think that's probably the best way to sum it up. We've brought in some fantastic players. We've managed to keep a hold of some, and I think going into the summer, unfortunately, we've not put ourselves in the best position to keep some of that talent. It's a frustrating one, but at the same time, I'm not gonna complain too much because as I was saying on Babbling, you know, I've seen Avram Grant manage West Ham, so it's while there's some incredibly frustrating results, some things that at the top level I just think impact far more than the manager, and the constant circus we see, lack of recruitment, replacing players, came back to bite us in the second half of the season. So it is an incredibly unfortunate one. You know, I don't want to say goodbye to Moyes under this sort of circumstance. It's not. I would have liked it to be far more positive, but I just think what a missed opportunity. And part of that is down to him. Part of that is down to the ownership, and it's unfortunate.
Where did you think West Ham would finish this year? Obviously, after Prague and everything, that was just an amazing moment. And obviously, this season, we come into the season, really, the fan base was split from last season, really, because I think a lot of people wanted him out the door. And, you know, where would you have put West Ham last season for this season? That's just been.
I mean, it's a tricky one because I think I would have said we were about seventh or eighth with what we had. But again, classic West Ham. We knew we wanted a striker all summer. We let Scamacca go, and all we were hearing was that Moyes wanted Solanke, and nothing. You know, not even a dodgy loan of a South American that we know that Sullivan loves. So it was very frustrating. You know, even Tim Steiten went out and tried to get Yuri Alberto, and was told no, the finances are too much. It's one of those where I think Moyes will look and point to it and say, look, I clearly wasn't back to the point that I needed to be. You can't just suddenly go from two strong attackers to one attacker who's aging, not always fit and dependable, and a player who doesn't suit the system. So it was a small squad, cliche, but I think one that it should never happen in football, not in 2024. With the money involved as an owner, I don't think you should be putting anyone in that position.
I agree with you 100% on that. West Ham should never be in a situation where we're relying on our youngsters to come in and save us. Like, do you know what I'm saying? There's so many times this season just gone that we've looked at it and gone, like, we're crying out for youngsters or someone to come in and save the day for us because our experienced players are just not good enough. Do you know what I mean? Your Danny Ingses, your Maxwell Cornets, and people got their mixed views on them, both of them players, but I just don't think they are what West Ham need. Like, I just think Danny Ings doesn't fit the system, and I don't think he's going to fit Lopetegui's system. And I think Maxwell Cornet is a walking sick note now. I just think he just hasn't done anything of any note to say warrant. Is he going to be given a chance? I agree. I agree. I think it's been a tough season. I don't know about you boys over there, but it's been very up and down, very toxic in the West Ham sort of community. What are you saying on in regards of that, in regards of sort of that sort of issue?
It's one of those where I try and avoid a lot of the negativity.
Yeah.
I did say that after the Palace game, in my opinion, I think Moyes should have walked, because the results were just unacceptable, and I think it didn't help that we know he has friends in the media, and there was a lot of parroting going on of this "be careful what you wish for," and the idea that we shouldn't strive for more just because we'd had a trophy, which, look, it was amazing, and it was probably the best night of my life. I'll come out and say it. But the fact is that the form in 2024 was unacceptable. That is for any club, it would have been unacceptable. And I think the thing that saved him was the run in the Europa. And had that not happened, if we'd gone out the round earlier, I think he probably would have left. Now, I'm not someone who would say, "Oh, I'd take a loss to see the back of him." I don't think that's the right attitude. But it got to the point where I think the people who were anti-Moyes got just not disrespectful to him, but I think it got disrespectful to anyone who wasn't on their wavelength. And look, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I think when you're throwing abuse at people, maybe that's the time to take a look in the mirror. And I think particularly when you look at what David Moyes came out and said recently about the fan coming up to him and saying that the trophy in Prague meant nothing, for me, that's just embarrassing. It's a really nasty thing to say, but also it's just not true. It's ignorance, really, because it may well be a third-tier European trophy, but it's still a cup win. And would you say that about the Carabao Cup?
So I'll take anything, Sloth.
Yeah, exactly.
43 years of not winning nothing, and all of a sudden it seems like the fan base feel like they're entitled now to sort of be in this bracket of we're this big club, we're this top six side, and I agree. When I did hear that about Moyes, Sloth, I thought that was very sad, the way that sort of come out.
I think it's incredibly difficult to try and explain to people, especially those outside of West Ham. But I've got a couple of friends who are like Chelsea and Arsenal fans, and they were asking me about it, and I said, look, the fact is that we were promised a lot of things, and I know it's cringeworthy to say, "Oh, promises were made and they weren't fulfilled," but when you were told specifically that you'd be going to a stadium that would be world class, and would be consistently pushing for top six, like fighting for the top four, no one's under the illusion that that's always going to happen. But when you turn up there, and let's face it, it was a soulless bowl at first. It's still not a perfect venue. I've been there on European nights, like against Frankfurt, and it's been absolutely rocking. But it's not a patch on Upton Park. It's not a patch on the Berlin ground. And I think when you say it like that to people, they start to understand why West Ham fans expect more. It's not a case of we deserve to be there. It's a fact that, this is what we were told, and this is what we were promised to leave where we were, and where I think everyone loved. It wasn't a case of everyone was going, actually, we need to move here because it's not good enough anymore. It's not like Old Trafford where it's falling down. It's a case of we were told we're going to leave here to push on. And all this next level stuff is all well and good. Like it's all well and good being told that, but when you have to give something up to get there, it becomes a whole different kettle of fish. And that's where I think so much of this anger comes from, and the expectancy that we should be doing more. We should be doing more than just avoiding relegation and, finishing mid-table. Now is the time where we move on and try and become a team that is not just safe in the Premier League, but is safe challenging for those European spots.
Would you say a top 10 side for you?
Yeah, I'd say that's what we would have felt like, over the last few years. And I think that's what David Moyes has turned us into, a top 10 side. But I kind of have to caveat that with the fact that we don't have the squad of a top 10 side. We very much rode our luck in terms of having players like Jared Bowen, like Kudus and Paqueta fit at times. It's been incredibly lucky, because if we'd had an injury to Bowen, I think you could be talking about a very similar season to last season, where we're mixing around that relegation zone and then pushing forward.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on that. I think there was a lot of times, especially in the season, where I felt that we was riding our luck. Burnley away springs to mind, where we was awful and we managed to spin it around. Forest at home. Yeah, loads of games really when I think about it, and it sort of painted it in a different sort of light. But let's move on to this. The best and worst moments of the season for you, Sloth.
Oof. I mean, the best moments for me have got to be the European nights. I think when you get a taste of them, and when you have, I'm very lucky to have a season ticket and get to all the European home games in particular. When you get a taste of them, there's not quite anything like it. There's the chances of West Ham getting to the FA Cup knockout rounds, like the latter rounds, that doesn't happen that much. So it's it became something that for me it's just the best experience I've had as a West Ham fan so far. And I'm 31 now, but hopefully I'll see a fair few more. Those for me, especially the Freiburg win, that for me is the best moment of the season so far. There's been a few like the Emirates win away. That's a fantastic one. But it brings me on to the worst moment, which was easily, I think, the 6-0 thrashing at Arsenal at home. I just think that was an embarrassing one. And I think when you look at some of the thrashings we got, I think Palace runs it close.
Yeah.
But
I think Fulham and all.
Yeah, I mean the Fulham one didn't sting as much, because I've been a West Ham fan long enough to know that generally there's at least one. There's at least one a season, and that was the first one. So I was like, I can take that. I can. That's all right. It's not so bad. But the Palace one stung, I think, because I didn't expect it. That was where it hit me the hardest, I think.
I think, I agree. I think some of the Amarins this year have been awful. Like Fulham, even Villa away. I remember that game where I know Villa are a good side, don't get me wrong, but there's no way we should be going up there, not doing anything, and then we lose 4-1. Liverpool in the cup, in the Carabao. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, that was an Amarin. Obviously, Chelsea, Palace, Arsenal, some of them moments. Yeah, they were so hard to take. And I think it was just a collective of everything. I think everyone just had enough of everything. If I'm being honest, Stuff, I think everyone had enough of just West Ham as a whole. Like the manager, the players, and I remember speaking to people who was at the Arsenal home game, and they was walking out. And this is what I was going to lead on to before we move on. Was you there that day?
Yeah, I was.
Did you stay to the end, or did you walk out at half time? Or
I think I left at like the 89th minute, 88th.
Yeah.
So
and what was it? What was it like in there? Because obviously the day after, I done a video in regards of it, and people said it was one of the hardest losses West Ham's had for a long time, especially at home.
I think though it was like you could hear a pin drop,
Yeah,
and the only time you couldn't, it was groans. Like it was just people getting worked up, and it was a horrible atmosphere because it wasn't like we got behind them at any point. I think because they scored so kind of early on, and they dominated from the very first second. I think everyone was just beaten down by the end of it.
yeah.
It was not a nice game to go to. And yeah, I think even I turned to my dad and said that's the worst game I've seen from us in a long time. You know, I think the Fulham game, we had a few players out. We had a few players
Yeah,
who were unwell. We had a sickness bug or something.
yeah.
Not that that's an excuse, but like I think for the Arsenal game, it was terrible.
It was embarrassing, I must admit, and I'm actually glad that we sort of managed to get over that because I think in other seasons that would have literally crippled us completely. But we'll move on to this man, and that is David Moyes. Interesting topic of conversation is going to be because two questions for you, Sloth. First off, how will you sort of remember his time at West Ham, and what do you think of his time at West Ham this season?
I'm going to remember his time very fondly. I'm not going to kid myself and say that the football's been amazing. I think it's been a really nice change of pace to see us expect to win games, not from just like a Mr. Negative standpoint, but from the fact that under Pellegrini, I still didn't expect us to go into games and win. I think under Moyes, it got to the point where I was confident in the base that we had and the squad and first 11, where I was thinking, right, we should be winning these games. And it was nice to have that, to eventually get to go into Europe. And look, I made no secrets about this. I am very open about the fact that I have got rose-tinted glasses with this. You know, we lost my granddad 2 years ago, and he managed to get to a lot of the European games. You know, whether it was away or whatever it was. So my memory is always going to be positive of the fact that I got to go to those away trips, and we got to do those sort of things, experience European nights with 3 generations of West Ham fans. You know, so for me, that's fantastic. I think going out to Frankfurt, and I had to buy a ticket in the home end and sneak in there and very, very sheepishly sit quietly with my hands between my legs while there was pandemonium around me. But that's something I'll never forget. And it was, it's something that for me, I think West Ham fans should look at this as a really strong time, and hopefully we'll be sat here in 5 years saying that was the start of something great. You know, Moyes' tenure was the start of something great.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Moyes has set a standard at West Ham now that we all can believe that West Ham are that side. I don't think anyone really believed West Ham could do what they could do under Moyes, and honestly, he's divided a lot of opinion. He's been very, very stubborn, man. I won't lie, and in his approach and everything. But I do feel that he has sort of springed West Ham up to a level, and now it's down to the next manager to take us to the next level or keep us at that level. How will you remember him this season, though, for you, as his final season?
I think if I'm talking purely about 2024, it's been a disaster. Let's not sugarcoat it. I think we've seen the very best and the very worst of David Moyes. You know, the first half of the season, absolutely fantastic. We're flying, and I think there were so many videos that so many channels did where I think we all sat there and said, if we can go into January, if we can strengthen and we can add a few players, wow, will be really performing, and we can push on. And we do know that the whole recruitment team wanted Osman. Didn't happen. But we know that Moyes in particular pushed for Wright Phillips, and Calvin Phillips, Wright Phillips.
Yeah.
Been what match of the day has got into my head after Ian Wright's goodbye. But I think after Phillips came in, I even tried to be quite positive of that. I was never a fan of him, but I tried to be quite positive about the fact it was just a loan.
Yeah.
And there's no way to sugarcoat it. I think that window, that transfer was an absolute disaster. There's no other way to put it. It quite literally cost us points, and potentially a spot in Europe. I think if there had perhaps been, I'm going purely off rumours and what I've heard in terms of certain players targeted and pushed back against, and Moyes in particular wanting Premier League proven players. I think it was like a melting pot, and unfortunately, it got a terrible dish at the end. But
yeah, I do. On the January window, I do agree it was a complete balls up. I do feel that, I don't know why, but I feel like the ball sort of led Moyes to the end, basically, if that makes sense. Because like, as soon as we get Calvin Phillips and we get rid of 5 players and we don't bring in no attackers, that tells me all you really need to know. And when you're sort of relying on Ben Johnson to come in and be your winger, then that's not good. But I do agree with what you're saying. I think the January window, especially Calvin Phillips, it just didn't work out, did it? Let's be honest. But we'll move on to this man, the future under Julian Lopetegui. Me and you had a bit of backwards and forwards about him on social media. What do you make of him, Sloth? Because I'm going to be honest, I always thought this game was coming. And I knew about him sort of in December time, where I thought, you know what, it wouldn't surprise me if West Ham go for this geezer, and they did. What are you saying in regards of him?
Look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm excited about it. I think, I think this whole situation's been incredibly frustrating. This little dance that we've done with managers and this flirtatious thing that we did with Amorim is just very weird. And I think if all these different things have been bandied about, contracts to David Moyes and flying Amorim over to supposedly offer him a contract and try and tempt him to take the job, yet you've still got Lopetegui, who's been attending games for months and has apparently already agreed the deal. I think it's a really strange, and to me it's unprofessional. Like, I know that you're supposed to talk to lots of different candidates and assess who is the best fit, but I just find it really strange that we've gone about it this way. Not that David Sullivan has, but just the fact that with new investors and with this new team, it's still gone about like this. It's quite disappointing. But as I said, look, I'm not going to pretend he's my first choice. He certainly isn't. He is going to work well with Tim Stuyton because he's got a fantastic track record in the transfer market. He's the man who's responsible for bringing Higuain to Real Madrid. You don't get to be the chief scout at Real Madrid if you haven't got an eye for a player. So I'm kind of hoping that he'll be able to fix this striker gap that we've had for so long now.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to pretend that he plays the best football in the world, because he certainly doesn't.
I agree with you. I agree with you on this, 100%.
And he is temperamental. Is probably the best word for it. Probably the kindest word for it. But I think one thing that you'll get from him is he doesn't suffer fools. He can play very entertaining football at times, but as opposed to Moyes, he's very flexible in how he will approach opponents. And one of the key things that used to annoy me about going to the big teams under David Moyes is that you knew he would give them a lot of respect. And you knew, particularly teams like Liverpool, you knew that if you went to Anfield, you were going to play a certain way, and you generally leave with nothing. And that's not something that he does do. He doesn't just say, right, guys, we're going to sit back and our chances are going to be few and far between, so we need to take them when they come our way. You know, he has a style of play, and I think for the squad that we have, it will be quite easy to implement that and transition onwards. So if he's here for 2 seasons and he can build a bit more of a squad, if he's going to be the person we back, if he's still here in 2 seasons, I think he can continue to build. But he's going to be someone that can recruit well, work with Tim Steiten to build a larger squad, because at the moment it is incredibly small and aging as well. And he's also going to be someone that in 2 years' time, if he's got us playing quite expansive passing football where, you know, we're looking to draw in the opposition and then counter and break past them, hopefully it's built on very big physical defenders who are composed on the ball. It's built on very fast attackers who can counter and beat a man, with a goal scorer up top. And if you give any manager that base of a squad coming into a new club, they should be able to do very well.
I agree. The only issue I have with Lopetegui is that his temperament is a bit you just never know what you're going to get with him. What is the expectation on him next season for you? Like, obviously, because the argument I have on Twitter, Sloth, is basically what's acceptable under him and what's unacceptable under him, and people are sort of pretty mixed. Some people like myself say I think a top 10 finish with West Ham is doable. I think with the players that we've got currently, if we add to that, we build around it, like your Bowen, your Kudus, your Alvarez, and all these players, then we should make top 10. Other people are sort of convinced that if we finish 12th, that's not a bad season with it being a transitional season. What are you saying on that?
I think if you finish in 12th, you have to have a good cup run. You have to have a cup run. It's not just a case of we've got some good players. We have got some very, very talented players. We've got some fantastic footballers at this club. And I don't know what's going to happen with Lucas Paqueta. So if we're tasked with replacing him as well, then I think potentially we can set our goals a little bit higher, because it's not like when we lost Rice. I think we can use that money, and say if we put £50 million towards Morgan Gibbs-White and then we put the remaining change up for someone like En-Nesyri and whoever Lopetegui and Steiten target, then we've got a much stronger base. So I think if the summer goes well, I completely agree. Nothing below top 10 is in my opinion acceptable. But I think let's not beat around the bush. There is a mess of a squad, and it's a very small squad. So if we're sat here this time next year and saying, you know, we really struggled to start the season and January we added, I wouldn't be that fussed about it, because that's what I expect. I think it's going to be a huge rebuild, and unless we get 6 players who are ready to step into the first team or push for the first team, I think we're probably going to be around 10th.
Are you slightly nervous about next season? Because I'll be honest with you, I am. I think it goes one or two ways. I think if we get the players in and they all hit the ground running together, then we could be that side that we expect to be, that top 10 side. If they don't, then West Ham won't be there. West Ham will be that sort of team that are sitting in mid-table, if not below mid-table, fighting to stay in the league. Like, it's not. I'm not. I don't want to be negative, but for me, when you're bringing in so many players, we've all been there before. 2016 after Upton Park, brought in a load of players, and obviously Tim Steins a different level to the person who brought them players in before. But what you saying on that regard? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Or are you balanced?
I think I try and stay balanced. I've tried to do the positive thing in the past
Yeah,
with Phillips, and that didn't work out. So I've gone back to trying to be balanced. I think modern football has gotten to the point now where this idea that you can't recruit a large number of players in one single window and progress is kind of counterintuitive. You look at Arsenal, you know, they brought in, what was it, 6 players last window, and Manchester City have had quite a few big windows. We look at other teams, you know, objectively you could say Liverpool had a poor window, but they're still up there, top 4. And I think I'm not expecting us to have that quality of player coming in, but when you have a potentially big budget, it's very hard for me to sit here and say I don't think you can find a better centre back than Kurt Zuma or Aguerd. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just mean that in terms of, if you can't go out and find a centre back who's quicker and more reliable fitness wise than both those two players, or less error prone, then that's a problem at the very top. That's something that should worry you. However, I'm confident in the fact that Tim Steiten and Lopetegui, you know, Lopetegui was key in bringing Jules Koundé to Sevilla, so he can spot a centre back. He wanted Mavropanos while he was at Wolves, so we know he likes to play. He tends to like to play a 4-1-2-3. So his central defensive mid will drop back and allow that sort of Roy of the Rovers cliche centre back to bomb forward.
yeah.
And I think he's going to have in his mind's eye what he wants. Tim Steiten's going to have that as well. So I think as long as they're both on the same page, which apparently is what we're hearing, you know, then I'm fairly confident. It's just about the fact that we need to realise that we cannot have a small squad. We cannot go into a season in Europe with a small squad. So this season, where we don't have that extra workload, we can kind of build a squad, but it has to be to the point where next season we're still looking to add.
Yeah, I agree. I really do. I think it is a big job for Lopetegui. I'm not going to lie. I think this one is the one where you're going to see him either excel or just completely collapse. How do you sort of see him with this 2-year deal though? Because what it is, it's a 2-year contract, a year extension if he gets Europe. How do you see it planning out to sort of round this video up? Because obviously the first year's transition, and then the second year's the attack, basically to say, right, we've got to try and attack to get in Europe. How do you see it going on that, mate?
Well, I think there's a really interesting comparison you can make with his time when he took over at Sevilla, and that's that when he came in, Sevilla were kind of around 7th and 6th place, and when he took over, he got them in the top 4. He got them in the Champions League, and he won them a Europa League as well. So he very much raised their level. He took them to the next level. To you know, use a somewhat apt term, but I think he's certainly the man who can do that in progressing a squad. I don't know if he's the man to progress a club long term, but he can definitely lay the foundation for that. And I think that when I'm talking about the recruitment, if you're looking at young players like Wesley, if you're looking at building from the academy as well, so you're looking at someone like Earthy, hopefully we'll get a few more looks at Scarles, because if Cresswell's signing this extension as well, we've got another left back spot there and he can come into the side and get more minutes. I think he won't be afraid to do that. He does like to mix those players in, but it's a case of, is he going to win the fans over? And I think that's where this situation with David Moyes has created such a divide in a way. If he doesn't start well, then he's got a mountain to climb.
Yeah. And I think that is the fear. I'm going to be honest. I think where the whole Moyes in, Moyes out thing has ended, I think it sort of carries over to this now. I think if Lopetegui starts fast, a lot of people will be saying, look, we told you. Get Moyes out. This is the situation. If he starts slow, then everyone will be saying, look what you've done, so to speak. But, in regard to that, what you saying in that sort of regard with Lopetegui, like is in like the Moyes in, Moyes out thing, is it going to be like that or not?
I think that if he starts poorly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's mostly targeted at the board.
Yeah.
And that's not a case of me trying to make excuses for the manager. I think that we've gotten to the point now where there is no other person to blame. It's very clear that a number of the decisions that have affected West Ham and our progress are only from one place. And I'm going to go back to the Dominic Solanke thing. You imagine what we would be like had we signed Dominic Solanke in the summer. And I'm not going to pretend that he would have played exactly the same way as he is at Bournemouth this season. But if we'd had an extra 12, 10 goals off the bench or coming into the side, maybe Antonio brings that because, he's been replaced as the number one, but he comes off the bench and brings that we wouldn't have finished in a higher position. Maybe we'd be 6 or 7 points better off.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to look at that and go, you know what? I think he was the problem. I think football fans, I go back to the promises that were made. Football fans remember that. They remember what you've said and what you've promised them, especially when it's tied so intrinsically to something that is, it's your home, your ground, where it's so intrinsically tied to memories that you have as a football fan. And if he doesn't start well, I think, he'll get his share of the anger, but I think it's going to go to the top first. And part of me, I never want to see West Ham fail. I never want to see West Ham lose. It's one of those where, I didn't want to see Arsenal win the title, but I still didn't want to see us embarrassed. I know a lot of people were joking about it being 5-1, 7-1, and whatever. I don't want that. But there is a curiosity in the back of my mind about if he does start badly, what's going to happen for the owners, because it could get ugly. And I just kind of hope for the fan bases in general that we can actually all just get behind him and we avoid that entirely. But part of me also wants to see that Sullivan does get his recognition from the fan base for just how much of an issue he is at the club.
I agree. Completely agree with you on that. 100%. And the best way to sort of round this up is that I think next season will prove quite a lot. I think the summer will prove everything to me, because West Ham have to start funding this new manager and the Stydon project. We've heard this project for so many times, Sloth. It's a project at West Ham project. Now the time is now. Because if it ain't now, it will be never. And let's hope Sullivan and co can do that, because I think the way they handled the Moyes situation and the way it's all ended that way, and going around inviting people around the arrest, to me, like Almering round at Fade and Boyce, and the way it's all gone, I think it's the right thing for Moyes to go and Lopetegui to come in. But now you've got to back the manager and you've got to give him what he needs, and he needs quite a lot. So yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. Sloth, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. Please do shout out all your social media links and YouTube channel, please, mate.
Thank you very much for having me on. First of all, it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, I am from Babbling Irons on YouTube. My is WHUFC Sloth. I'm West Ham Sloth. And yeah, thank you very much again for having me on.
No worries at all, mate. Anytime. That's been Sloth. That's been me. That's been his sort of season review. It's been a draining season. I'm glad it's over. I think Sloth's glad it's over too, and we can move on to the summer and see what happens under Lopetegui. But that's been me. That's been Sloth, and we'll see you again in the next one. Take care. Peace. Level up. Level up. Level up.